Greetings, heroes. What's going on, YouTube? This is Jim, and I thought today I would talk to you guys about one of my favorite characters in Heroes of the Storm, and that is none other than Li Ming. Now, this gameplay that I have for you obviously is pre-recorded, but I didn't actually know I'd do this good. This was just a random pickup hero league that I stumbled upon. I don't know any of these people. We do a little bit of chatting, obviously, when we set up our draft picks, and I think we got a pretty good draft selection. Li Ming is one of those heroes who is typically banned almost immediately in just about every draft mode I play, right up there with Tracer and Kel'Thas, and depending on the map, maybe Zagara or even the Lost Vikings. But typically you don't see a lot of Li Ming gameplay, and after playing with her sometime in both Quick Match and in Hero League, I can testify that I think that's probably a pretty good decision. Now, I will caveat this with I am no professional by any means, although I do play Heroes of the Storm pretty regularly with my group of friends. There will be misclicks, there will be goofy things that I do, weird places that I stand, but I'm going to try to talk you through what my mentality was on the gameplay, along with my skill picks, to maybe inspire some of you guys to go and play with Li Ming, and I think you will really enjoy it. Now, Li Ming has some standard abilities that she just gets just because right out of the door. Her Q attack is magic missiles. She'll shoot 3 missiles towards an area, and depending on how close or far your mouse cursor is from your character determines the spread. If you are trying to hit one enemy for all 3 missiles, obviously you put the cursor far away, but you can do some trick shots if you're up close and have them spread or go in different directions. This is really good if you're in the thick of things, but to be honest, if you're in the thick of things with Li Ming, you're probably doing it wrong. Her primary ability that I love to use, and you saw me just use it there against Hammer, is the Arcane Orb. Now, Arcane Orb is a really cool ability because it's an orb that as it gets farther from you, it gets stronger. When you're actually playing with her, you will not see it on this replay, but it shows a reticle on the map, and the farther away you are, the orb gets bigger and deals more damage. I will spec heavily into Arcane Orb. Lastly, she gets Teleport, which allows her to teleport a short distance instantly. I use that 100% defensively. There are some players who are a bit more aggressive than I that prefer to use Teleport as kind of a distance closer. I only reserve it purely for getting away. I play, again, extremely defensively. She has 2 ultimates. I will be selecting Disintegrate, which channels a powerful beam, dealing a small amount of damage constantly. As you move your mouse, it aims in the direction you want it to shoot. And lastly, her hero ability is Critical Mass. And that is participating in enemy takedown will automatically recharge all of your abilities, and all the cooldowns go away, and you could use them again, assuming you have the mana. Now, as a result of that, Li Ming is ferocious in team fights where 1 enemy, 2 enemies, 3 enemies begin to fall, and you can continuously spam your ultimate or your magic missiles or your Arcane Orb and do some significant damage. Now, as I mentioned, I like to play her extremely defensively, so you'll see me cowering away, always standing near towers, always trying to be in a group fight, always trying to be where everyone else is. Now, I don't have map visibility the way I do in this replay mode, so a lot of where I'm going into is the darkness, and that is why it is so important with Li Ming to constantly watch your map and constantly have a good idea where people are. She is, if not one of the most, she's definitely one of the more squishy characters in the game, and she does not take much punishment at all. So it's very, very important when playing with her to make sure that you're mindful of where enemies are at. And yeah, so let's just talk through some of the abilities as they pop up. On level 1, I like to go with her ability called Astral Presence. What Astral Presence does is it increases your mana regeneration by 100% when you're below a quarter mana. You will find with Li Ming how fast you can burn through mana, especially if you're in a team fight and enemy heroes start to fall. As a result, your mana pool will drop very, very quickly. And if you're defensive, extremely defensive like me, many times your mana pool will drop much more before your health pool will, and as a result, you're going to be auto-attacking. Her auto-attack is not that great, and without mana, Li Ming is pretty useless, so it's very important to have a pretty large mana pool. And Astral Presence will, when you're in those dangerous spots, buff you back up very rapidly to about 25% mana, which is enough to at least shoot 1 or 2 spells, definitely enough for teleport if you need to get away from the action a little bit quicker. At level 4, I like to use Triumvirate. Now what Triumvirate does is, if an Arcane Orb hits an enemy hero with this going at least 65% of its base range, the cooldown on your orb is reduced by 5 seconds. Now, if you are one of those players who is very familiar with League of Legends and the whole sniping philosophy, then you will probably not really care so much for this, because you're going to be getting those kills, and obviously a kill with Li Ming guarantees you get a complete cooldown. However, if you are just kind of poking at the enemy, getting off an Arcane Orb, and then reducing it by 5 seconds to get off another shot is very, very nice, and it's sometimes the difference between an enemy running away with low health and an enemy not running away at all. Now, I'm already level 7 in the game and a little bit behind. I will tell you about my level 7 ability, and then we'll talk through them as they continue. And I like to take Zai's Vengeance. Again, I am very heavily Arcane Orb focused. Zai's Vengeance does an additional 25% more damage to enemies that are far away. So if you really wind up that Arcane Orb shot, not only are you reducing the cooldown, but you're doing additional damage. And here you can see in this team fight, as enemy heroes start to fall, how quickly I am ramping up and hitting shot after shot after shot of this ultra deadly Arcane Orb. Something to be mindful of when you play with her, and if you do choose to play in the style that I do. The Arcane Orb has an incredible amount of splash damage. However, it is very easily interrupted by enemy minions, and that is going to be your #1 issue when using this build with an Arcane Orb. When you shoot an Arcane Orb into a pack of enemies, you're going to hit the first one, and that's it. That's why it's highly recommended you stand off lane at an angle, particularly in the bushes, or at least at a diagonal to an enemy, to get that juicy splash damage, to try to hit 3 or 4 enemies in a line, if possible, to really spread out that damage. If not, you're only hitting the first person, and while you do hit like a truck, you're only hitting that first person. Li Ming is also really, really good at hitting 2 different targets at once, primarily because of all her range. So oftentimes you will see me stand and help out a lane while I'm taking out a camp. Her Arcane Orb damage is so powerful, and it goes through multiple objects. This is, I believe, one of those examples. You can see me standing off, and I will start hitting an Arcane Orb at the camp while I begin auto-attacking some of the minions nearby. And I think that this is what makes Li Ming have some really great presence, is you're allowed to kind of spread around your damage a little bit and hit somebody, you know, in 2 places at once. And that's why, you know, you can be a little later to the team fights, because you do have that extensive range. Keep in mind, you never want to be the first person in a team fight with Li Ming. She will end, her health will drop extremely rapidly, especially after level 13, which I'll talk about in a minute. As I mentioned, we just hit level 10, so now we have our ultimate powers, and I like to stick with Disintegrate. Wave of Force actually knocks enemies away from you and deals damage. I find that with Li Ming, I want to be on the offensive, and although you can put a Wave of Force in an area and have all the enemies kind of push in one way or another, I find I like to let the enemies kind of do what they want. That really helps me set up my Arcane Orb shots, and I found in the past, typically, when I try to set up a shot, if somebody like Falstead uses his Gust and there's not a lot of coordination, or even Thrall's ability, the Earthquake, Sundering rather, you'll push enemies out of the way and you'll miss your shot. Now, Li Ming, especially with that long Arcane Orb range, really needs to make sure her shot is going in the right direction. And as a result, I don't like to mess with other people's presence. Now, if you are in a team fight situation and you do have, you know, some communication with your players, maybe in a sense you can use the Wave of Force, but just keep that in mind, that typically people are lining up shots, and you start pushing enemy heroes around, you're going to waste a lot of abilities quickly. Stitch's Hook is one of the biggest culprits I see of that. Here you can see me begin to chase just a little out of range. Now again, some players who are a bit more aggressive than me may have teleported away, but I don't use teleport in that ability. I like to use it purely defensively. Li Ming is very, very good in the bushes for this reason, because she's got that range, and you could always teleport outside the bushes or inside, whatever, and break up the vision just enough to typically get away from combat. So keep that in mind with her. Keep in mind also with the Disintegrate build, or at least the Disintegrate ultimate rather, that if you do get enemies in a line, you do more damage, obviously, because you're hitting everybody. It doesn't stop on the first hero. As a result, this is really good siege damage. If a lane is really built up, you could definitely shoot through and hit the catapult, for example, while you're hitting some of the front minions, and that's really beneficial to have if for whatever reason you find yourself in a pure siege mode and you are near an enemy wall. You could stand towards the bottom, very similar to what Thrall can do with his with the wolves, and shoot up at an angle and hit through both towers and the wall, no problem. So keep that in mind with Disintegrate. You want to line up her shot the best. Now level 13 is where I start to get a little different than some of the other players. I prefer the ability Glass Cannon. Now what Glass Cannon does is it increases all your abilities by 15% damage, but at a penalty. The penalty being you decrease 15% of your maximum health. Now, I did mention that Li Ming is by far one of the, if not the most weakest characters in the game in terms of health pool, and for that reason I feel like Glass Cannon is a perfect ability. Because the truth is, if you get hit, you're probably gonna die. And if you're standing there, you know, trying to fight an enemy or whatever, and you're out of position, you're a goner anyway. So why not take that, okay, mentality of, hey, I'm gonna die anyway, and buff up your abilities to do just a little bit more damage. Now, keep in mind that this stacks very, very well with some of the other talents that I've chosen, particularly Zai's Vengeance, which does an additional 25% more damage enemies far away. You get an additional bonus on top of that with the Glass Cannon perk. And also, when you get to level 20, one of the abilities, I'll talk about that, it gives you a little bit of bonus. And that is a really good synergy with some of her other builds. I know a lot of people like to use Illusionist, which when you teleport, it increases your range. And you get some health back if you're really low on health. But again, I don't play Li Ming that aggressively. You'll notice I do an extreme amount of backpedaling, if and when all possible. I'm always walking around structures so that only one of my sides is, you know, not completely flanked. I like to hug walls. I like to hug corners of the map, that sort of thing. Against another Li Ming in a quick match, this could definitely cost you because that Arcane Orb does go through walls. But I know for the most part I'm pretty safe here, depending on, you know, where you're standing situationally. But keep that in mind with her, that since she's not very powerful, you really need to kind of use the map to your advantage and really hug terrain whenever possible. Definitely have to use vision. Definitely have to play her off the minimap. So there you could see we killed Leoric. That's kind of a running theme of this particular game, but getting all those abilities again, I did shoot another orb almost immediately. I thought maybe someone else was nearby. They were not, but that's really, really important. Now, here's where I think I believe this exchange I do a little sloppy. Keep in mind that her teleport is not completely instant. There's a slight delay with it, and I believe, I don't remember if this one was this exchange or another exchange, but I keep getting hit by the terror because I'm trying to teleport away at the last second, and as you can see, I don't, and I stand there like an idiot. Again, like I said, I am no pro player by any means, but keep that in mind when you play with her, that you know, because of her low health pool and because of her, you know, teleport range and saving it for things that really matter, you probably shouldn't do that. There was just one of those examples where I did use the Disintegrate to clear out a pretty good wave. Level 16 now. Now we're getting into the final two picks. I like to go with, no surprise, Arcane Orbit. What Arcane Orbit does is the orb now travels an additional 25% further, but will do an additional 25% more damage. Now, all these percentages I've been mentioning are stacking and adding up, and you're starting to hit pretty hard. One thing to keep in mind with the Arcane Orb and all of these stackings is that you really want to be far away from the screen. You'll see when the Arcane Orb winds up, I mean, it's completely off the screen at this point. If I run slightly to the right when I shoot, from where I'm standing to the left, it just starts to go off the edge of the screen. So when you are in a team fight, again, this plays into my particular style very well. Extremely defensively, standing back as far as I can. Just getting the range of that Arcane Orbit, just where it needs to hit, right in the center, you know, kind of trying to surprise enemies off guard. Now, the Arcane Orb has come under some criticism because of how fast it shoots. A lot of enemies, you know, a lot of other people are saying that the Arcane Orb is just too fast to dodge, and playing against Li Ming numerous times, I can absolutely attest to that. So that is why standing kind of far away and off screen really plays into your advantage, because you have a really good chance of kind of sniping somebody. There I was just a little off on the range, but that would have been a really good hit on that tear. But you could see you basically auto attack once or twice, you walk forward and hit your missiles, and then you hit an Arcane Orbit and rinse and repeat. So you're doing a lot of this kind of strafing and strafing out. Now, I could understand if you were really into the teleport, you may be able to do that faster, but as you can see in a lot of these exchanges, I'm almost always out of mana. And as a result, there's a perfect example. Val is dead by my hand. All of my resets are on cooldown, and I can do nothing about it because I'm out of mana. And that's why I don't use teleport a lot, because to me it's just kind of wasted mana of, you know, bouncing around back and forth when you could just walk. So keep that in mind as well. Obviously, I think in this exchange, I probably could have done a little better job of chasing. So maybe if a teleport makes more sense to teleport and then quickly follow into an Arcane Orb, potentially maybe you could hit an enemy as where I would miss, but that's okay. Now this match we did obviously win. If you guys couldn't tell, it's pretty much one-sided at this point. We're winning a lot of the team exchanges. Always with Li Ming, try to have a buddy system in place. You know, I know a lot of people like to run down the minion line, and they like to have other minions nearby to kind of help them out and absorb some of the damage that they get. But because of her, how weak she is, it's really, really beneficial to be with other heroes as opposed to just the minions. But if you find yourself in a laning situation, just remember you're not going to push really hard with her. You're going to do some decent burst damage at a range with your arcane your Arcane Orb, and then you're going to run away. You're not going to stand there like you would with a Sylvanas or with a Sonya or somebody else, just hitting directly up against like a wall, or if you're taking out a fort or something. You're always going to be poking in and running away, and that's kind of her mantra, is this very quick burst damage and very quick out. Obviously, she's an assassin. This does fit the bill with what you would expect, but that said, it's very important, in my opinion, to play her very defensively. A lot of people like to play her in a very aggressive way, and as a result, they usually pay the price. I mean, there you can see one ultimate from Hammer took me down a little more than half health, and look at the level difference we had. So that makes a difference, and that's why you have to be on the kind of on the guard with her. At level 20, there's a couple different abilities you could select. I know I'm not quite there yet, but I wanted to talk through these because I think they're important. The one that I love to use is Tal Rasha's Elements. What Tal Rasha's Elements does is your abilities benefit from a 10% bonus damage as long as they are not cast twice in a row. This is why having a good rotation kind of in your head with Li Ming matters. Now, obviously, her cooldowns aren't such that, you know, if she's in a team fight, you could definitely spam missiles, but if you could sneak in the Arcane Orb in between missiles, I think you will find that you do a lot more damage, and again, that 10% stacks with everything else. And it's important to have a nice rotation. Some people like the Diamond Skin ability, or I'm sorry, not Diamond Skin, the Temporal Flux ability, which Disintegrate actually slows enemies by 60%. You could see in a couple times where I'm shooting Disintegrate at an enemy who is running away, and sometimes I burn them down in the back, and sometimes they sneak away with just a sliver of health. Now, I don't chase them by a teleport or anything like that. And in this particular composition we had, other than Tracer, we really don't have a lot of, like, what I'd say close the gap characters. I guess Murden could use his Dwarf Toss, but that is not instant as far as, like, you know, like Illidan has a dive, for example. That's kind of what I'm talking about. But keep in mind that in characters who are pursuit characters, you may want to take Temporal Flux instead, simply because that slow is going to give your characters enough time to run up to an enemy and try to finish them off with the final 2 or 3 shots. And, you know, for me, though, the way I like to play, again, extremely defensively, shooting a lot of times almost completely off screen that I can't even see what's going on. Tal Rasha's Elements for me comes in handy. If I know I want to hit an orb, for example, I will go ahead and just cast missiles right in front of myself, even though I'm not going to hit anything, just so I have that orb ready to go, ready to be queued up for that big juicy damage. And I think here we burned down the core, so anyways, I'm going to let this play out. There's not much left here. You guys check out my score, and let me know what you guys think about my Li Ming gameplay. Like I said, I think she's definitely one of the most impressive characters in terms of just raw damage. I think she's definitely up there with a Falstad or KT, which is, again, why she is banned so much. But Again, a layman like me playing extremely defensively, really speccing into one ability, knowing where the battlefield is, knowing when to use abilities, when to be aggressive, when not to be aggressive, is going to net you a pretty good game. And I did not die a single time, and I feel like I was a factor in a lot of those attacks. I feel like I had the killing blow in a lot of those attacks, so I had a really good game. Anyways, that's all for today. I want to thank you guys so much for watching, and until next time, I will see you guys on the other side.